2.
The Free Energy Special Interest Group, where science meets spirituality in the quest for truth and knowledge to free humanity and transform this planet into a paradise.
Hi everyone. Hi, this is Crystal, welcoming you to FESIG's 136 meeting. Today is the 7th of May 2025, and we hold our FESIG public meetings once a month, but with 2 sessions, 2 speakers speaking, and it's on the first Wednesday of the month. So please be aware that that's the time you will put aside some time to join us so you can have a live interaction with our speakers, who are some of the most brilliant minds on the planet, I say, because they are. And they are generously sharing their information, their knowledge, their skills, their developments to help us along with understanding how we can progress with what we are here to do. So it's a learning platform where we learn together, folks. So now I would like to share screen so you can see the agenda that we have today. Here we are. So we have our, oh, hang on a minute. Let me just do a big screen. Yep. So we, okay. It's a special interest group, Free Energy Special Interest Group. I have here my co-chair, Dr. Fresh Frezel, and our team, Pontus, Henry, I think Matthew's not present, Jerry is here. So we are all together here doing this work, our divine mission of putting together a platform where science meets spirituality, where we all invite everyone to come together here to study with us so we can move forward with what we are here to do. We're developing free energy devices or healing technologies or whatever it may be that can help humanity much ahead with its evolutionary path. So our policy is that we are open-minded, futurist freedom seekers group, and we are open to all teachings. So I always say, take the best and throw the rest. So there are people who would, be saying that, oh, there's too much spirituality with the speaking, we want more science and so on. So, but I make sure that we have a good balance here. Okay. So today's agenda is we have Speaker 1, the first session, Byron Belitsos. I will read his bio in a minute. He's fantastic. He's a renowned exponent of the Urantia books, as a lot of people here on this platform knows about, and we have him honoring our meeting today. So he will explain more about the understanding of the Urantia books and its theology. Okay, and the second speaker, once we finish with this first session, folks, stay on because we have the second speaker, Thomas Waslak, talking about the technology side of things. He's an inventor of different types of energy conversion devices into usable power output. So it should be very interesting with our R&D team members, our technologists here as well with the listeners. Yeah. So if you want to contact me, please write to crystal@truevisionofpeace.com. If you have suggestions for speakers, write to me about it. That will be great. And if you want to help us, join our team and we can march forward there. As I mentioned earlier, but before the recording starts, we don't have any funding, no sponsorship, no whatever. So it's all through our own pockets, and we're doing this for you from our hearts with passion. And so we've been marching on since, 9 years ago now, all through our own pockets. So we encourage you, if you have extras to pay forward, please donate. Go to our website, truevisionofpeace.com/FESIG.html, and you'll see a donate button. So we ask that you pay forward so we can continue with this good work for you, because our resources are also drying up as well. And we have 3 we have 3 video channels: YouTube, BitChute, Odyssey. Unfortunately, our best performing videos, which goes in the BitChute, may not be accessible in UK, which is not accessible at all. I don't know about other countries. I think slowly things are being phased out. So look out, okay? And we have our Facebook, where you can get a lot of information in the Learning Together platform. Go to Free Energy Special Interest Group and you'll find us there. Join our Telegram group so you can interact with each other and even with the speakers as well. And you can form study groups together after every talk session. And that's it. Thank you for listening. So back to me here. I have my first speaker coming up very soon. We are so lucky to have Byron Belitsos gracing our website. So I would like to introduce him properly, to honor him and his presence gracing our website here. I want to introduce him properly. Byron Belitsos is a theologian and globally recognized expert on the Urantia books. He will begin with a look at today's academic discipline known as evolutionary theology. Contemporary theologians of science posit that God is always present to physical and biological evolution through divine immanence, that is, through a sacred presence that is animated by the divine purposes. In other words, a dynamic divine energy, for example, undergirds biological processes, conferring upon them the surprising ability to adapt through spontaneously occurring genetic variations. So, folks, this talk will introduce the theology and cosmology of Urantia. I'm sorry, folks, I forgot to put my headset on, so you can't hear me well enough. So I'm just going to do that in the middle of introducing Byron. Okay, I got my head. So I was speaking about to the point where, this talk will introduce theology and cosmology of the Urantia revelation, and will conclude with a special look at the Urantia book's revelation about quantum plenum that is intrinsic to the space-time universe. This refers to the infinite reservoir of space-time universe, reservoir of space potency, which can give rise to star formation when initiated by certain personal beings known as force organizers. Byron holds a BA in intellectual history from the University of Chicago and a Master of Arts degree in systematic theology from Union Theological Seminary in New York City, and is the author of Truths About Evil, Sin, and the Demonic, WIPF, and Stock, 2023, A History of Christian Theology, and the first academic work to introduce the Urantia book. He was also an inaugural member of Ken Wilber's Integral Institute and is founder of the Rodin Institute and the Urantia Book Academy. Byron's books on the Urantia revelation include The Center Within, 1998, and The Adventure of Being Human, 2012, Your Evolving Soul, 2017. He's a winner of a Nautilus Silver Award in Philosophy and Reason and Revelation, 2024, which is very recent, just last year, and the first anthology of academic essays on the Urantia text. Thank you, Byron. You're so accomplished. Thank you for gracing our platform here. Now over to you. You can take up the microphone now and start.
Okay, thank you, Crystal. Thank you, everybody, for.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm honored to be here with you, and I'm also kind of surprised to be with scientists, visionary scientists, which I suppose you are. Because I am more on the theology and the humanities side, but I come from a medical family, and I grew up more or less among scientists, but I went to the other side, history, poetry, psychology. But I try to keep a foot in science, and in particular because of the training of the Urantia book, because it's a text, a scriptural text that actually has hard science in it. And a lot of folks are not aware of that fact, but we should, those who are contemplating that should remember that the Urantia book came through over almost 100 years ago. So the science is going out of date. However, much of the science was prophetic, we believe. And before I get going, I'm just going to take a quick poll of any of you who have actually held the Urantia book and tried to read the text. If you raise your hand. Okay, so none of you. So we're going to start from the beginning. So the Urantia text has about 1 million copies have been distributed. Um, it has no publicity. They basically do no advertising. It's all by word of mouth, and the people that originally published it had a policy that this thing's ahead of its time and will be misunderstood, so we should have slow evolution and just let people hand it off to their colleagues and friends in a slow kind of development. So it's one reason many of you may not have heard of it. However, it would be, I think, of interest to people working in free energy because it would appear that it has very definitely concepts that feed into what we understand about zero point energy today. And this needs to be better known. And because of this aspect of the Urantia book, there are a number of Urantia folks, students, who are very interested in kind of work that you do. And in particular, someone named Joel Garbon, Garbon, who is the publisher, editor of one of the first magazines covering your sector. I think it was called the Infinite Energy. I can't remember at the moment, but it was in the 90s and up until it was suppressed, basically. And you guys know what that's all about. There was a death associated with this, and one of the scientists that was, prominent during that time, whose works were he was publishing in the magazine. And there's a whole backstory that some of you probably know to that. And I am a close friend of Joel's, and Joel got out of that line of business because of the suppression. I also became a colleague and close friend of Foster Gamble, and I think you all know him and his work and consolidating, putting a lot of this information into his first film that I would expect all of you have seen, called Thrive. That was some years ago. And the scientists that were interviewed, I know some of them that he interviewed, because in our circles in the U.S., we have been able to kind of cross-fertilize with one another at various conferences. And in fact, I'll be seeing some of the same people at the Contact in the Desert, the major conference at the end of this month, where these things are being discussed by some people. But the suppression is still going on, and yet I think we're making progress. But what's interesting is that a scriptural text is telling us that this is the case, that there is such a thing as free energy, but they have a unique terminology which I'll kind of summarize right now. Then I'm going to read you then I'm going to show you kind of a map of the cosmos according to the Urantia book. Then I'm going to read you from the pertinent part of the Urantia text that talks about the free energy phenomenon. Their term for that is space potency. So this is a kind of a theological term in the sense that space and all things, matter, space, energy, are of origin from deity. So this is a creator-centered cosmology. So this is a theology, but it's a very advanced theology which unifies science and religion and science and spirituality. So the creator of the universe is the source of space potency, and is the source of something called paradise. So this is something that may be quite new because paradise is a mythic term, really, from the Bible. So that sometimes the Urantia revelators, we call them revelators, will take something from tradition and then will transmute the meaning of the term. So the term paradise refers to the absolute pattern of all physical things. There is an absolute pattern of matter, and that's known as paradise, which is a particular location in the universe, actually is the center of all things. So this is the notion, entertained by Einstein and others, that there is a center periphery distinction, that the universe, the cosmos, has a center, but of course, the center of all things would be outside of space-time, right? So it's not a center in terms of linear, space and time, but a singularity at the source and center of all things. For Urantia people, we don't just say source when we refer to God. We say source and center. So the first source and center is deity, is God, Father, Mother. So this is the eternal, infinite, omnipresent, omniscient source of all things, life and energy. So life, it's easier to think of life as being sourced from a creator being, but energy is also sourced from the center of all things. So the center of all things is eternally streaming energy out in all directions. Now there's a distinction that's critical in Urantia cosmology, is that the center is a universe. So there's a central universe, right? So we have the center of all things, around which is a cosmos of beings and worlds. So these are worlds. So think of it sort of in Christianity, the seventh heaven, so to speak. This is the highest heaven outside, but in scientific terms, it's perfectly outside of space-time, but the source of space-time. So it is, as the center of all things, is the source of energy. I should just, for a moment, indicate that in the central universe, there are beings, aside from the deities, that are eternal, but they're sort of the citizens of the central universe, and they live on domiciles, their spheres, that are actually in space-time to in a certain sense, but the center of all things is this singularity, this source that is outside of space-time. So the deities of the Urantia book are somewhat like the traditional Christian Trinity. Right. So the traditional Christian Trinity is, if you can remember that from Sunday school or something, is a unity of three beings who are not entities. They're personalities in a certain very supernal sense of personhood, meaning they're the absolute persons, and they're the source of personhood. So all persons are sourced from the eternal persons, and they have this kind of community of being of community of absolute eternal present persons that are creators and have many other functions, and so they have sort of reality domains associated with the first, second, and third person of the Trinity. So the first person is the Father, actually the Father, Mother, but they use the term Father as distinguished from actually the Mother, which is the second person. But there's a third person, and the third person is the unity of the first two. So the third person is the conjoint action of the first and second person. So this is new theology. It's not really, it's implied in Christian theology, but this is very explicit in the Urantia book and very, very well spelled out. So the third person of the Trinity sounds like there's a sequence to start with one, and then it's a time sequence, but it's not. They're always eternally present, and there's no one prior to the other. But we still, for human for us in space and time, we need to think of a sequence, but it's not a true sequence. So, but in the interactions of the deities, there's a fourth element that is inevitable in eternity. It's an eternity inevitability, which is paradise, which I mentioned. So paradise is impersonal, but the infinite of matter. But it's impersonal. So it's not a personal being, but it's the platform upon which the universes are built or patterned after. A little bit like what Plato said in the Timaeus, if you remember that from college, that the creator had a pattern. Excuse me. The creator had an absolute pattern. Um, in sorry, this had got over a cold. So there's an absolute pattern that Plato's deity created the universe based on this absolute pattern. So this is a little bit like what the Urantia Book says, is that this inevitable outcome of the three deities being this infinite pattern called paradise, which is a place, which is matter, but it's the absolute of matter. So this is the platform upon which things are projected out into the universes. So imagine then that there is outside of space and time is the center, and then there's a project to have time-bound universes, time and space-bound universes. There's a project of deity to project personal beings made in the image of God out into worlds that are more denser worlds. And these worlds, according to the Urantia Book, are manifold. The Urantia Book says there are 7 trillion inhabited planets. Now, this is a text that comes through the 1930s, so it's 100 years ahead of what was known about planetary life at that time. And so this project is a kind of dialectical activity because you have eternity at the center of this, which is existential. It's self-existing, right? A self-existing eternal center. And then you have a periphery, which is space and time bound, and in which life is implanted from the center, from the central universe. So the central universe is source of energy, but it's also source of life. So this emanation of energy and life into space. And then there's a great and grand evolutionary project. So the center, of course, is outside of evolution. It's non-evolutional. It's also non-experiential. So the center has a kind of a deficit. So the central universe, the beings of the central universe, are not experiencing beings, but they're living beings and they're eternal beings. So they don't have the kind of the adventure of experience and evolution. That's what we provide. We provide this massive, vast experience of trillions of beings, humanoid beings, of having experience in space-time challenges and survival and evolution and ascension. So there's a relationship of the center periphery, that the center is non-evolutional, but it's perfect, right? It's perfect, inherently perfect, eternal, and as beyond space and time. But the periphery in space and time is imperfect, but it's perfecting. It's evolving. It's perfecting in the process of becoming perfect. And this is the biblical notion of become perfect as I in heaven. The Father says, become perfect as I am perfect. I in heaven and imperfect in heaven. So this notion of deification or divinization or theosis in the Greek term is from Eastern Orthodox mysticism, one of my specialties, is actually embedded in the Urantia teaching. So again, the periphery universes are in the process of perfecting, and as they perfect, you're ascending. You as a perfecting ascender are ascending back toward the center universe. This is this very, very grand notion of future life, of the afterlife. There's no literature on the planet that's anywhere close to the Urantia book's depiction of the afterlife. And it's a very precise and sort of science-based notion of an afterlife in which you're ascending through these worlds that are interdimensional worlds until you're ready to go into outside of space and time into the center. So when you go into the center after many billions of years, actually, of your ascension, you will then be in dialogue really with the beings in the central universe, and they were learning from you what it was like to be experiential. That's what they don't know. They don't know what it's like to have all the vicissitudes of life out here. So it's a beautiful marriage of the existential and the experiential. So just a bit about evolution, biological evolution. So the notion here is that there's a God-centered universe, that life is not a spontaneous, self-creating process. So this fairly crazy idea that life kind of invents itself out of chemistry is invalidated, not just in the Urantia book, but in many other philosophies. It's a reductionist view, which is actually has no logical basis. So the Urantia book is affirming that. But so the deities make a plan for implantation, I should say, of life on any particular planet that's evolving in space-time when it's ready for life. And life is not spontaneously occurring, as I said. Life is planted by particular beings on a sphere, on a material sphere, when the atmosphere, when the water, when the geophysics and the tectonics, et cetera, are ready for life. There's a stability in the planet. So these beings actually carry life to the planet. Who are these beings? These beings are called life carriers. And one of the most fascinating things in the Urantia book is there's chemists, they're biochemists that are supernatural beings that have labs in interdimensional realms, right? So in these labs, they formulate a single cells to implant, but those cells are adapted to the planet. So let's say you have a planet that has no atmosphere at all. There is a form of life that they can implant on such a planet that has no atmosphere. And that's a very special category of life called non-breathers, non-breather worlds. It's about 2 or 3% of all worlds are non-breathers. They take in sunlight and other ways of sustenance. So they will formulate the life plasm, if you will, and drop it into inland oceans where it begins to incubate and where it begins to evolve. So the evolution occurs over millions of years in all cases, a very, very, very slow evolution, but this evolution has elements in it that are from paradise itself. These are emanating energies, life energies from paradise, and this is what pressures or motivates the evolution and gives it this survival, this intention, this craving for survival that all life has, and this is divinely sourced. So it's one of the things I wanted to get across here is that this is a cosmology in which beings are in charge of all of these things. It's not there's lots of spontaneity. There's lots of things such as random mutation, genetic mutation. There's a lot of randomness, but there's also control. So it's kind of both together. There's a controlling factor from the deities and subordinate beings. There's a controlling, over control, they call it, factor. But there's also the allowance for speciation, in Darwinian evolution, right? There's this random mutations that will give forth to, different modifications. And the Urantia book's view of biological evolution is one of punctuated equilibrium rather than gradual evolution. So some of you may know that those advocates of punctuated equilibrium, which is affirmed in the Urantia book, that this again it has to do with divine design, right? So the appearance of species that are completely new in the process of speciation is by divine design. I can't say much more about that. We'll run out of time, but there's always this divine intent and design. So the species that appear all at once, and with all the characteristics of a new species. That's punctuated in equilibrium in a layman's language. But the impulse of evolution is a divine factor that moves this forward, and that there are these beings, and there's a whole catalog of other beings that are involved, but the life carriers are the most interesting and the most prominent in biological evolution. Now I'm going to turn to physical evolution, where I have less training, but I'll give you my best. That the space itself, according to the Urantia revelation, is nearly absolute as such. And it's the nearest to being absolute that in the physical cosmos. Space, according to the Urantia book, has resident in it potency, but this potency is pre-electronic and pre-gravitational. So the potency that is inherent, intrinsic in the quantum plenum, as some folks call it, is an ocean, a reservoir of energy and power and potential. So that is inherent, intrinsic in space from creator intention. How does this potency of space eventuate into star formation? So the Urantia book states uniquely that there are particular beings that take space potency and render it as energy that's responsive to gravity. And there's another type of being that takes energy, pure energy, and renders it possible to manifest matter. So energy is transmuted into matter, but there's beings that do this. But these beings are really like artificial intelligent entities that are self-aware. But these are very, very highly powerful, created beings that have this technical job of doing this. So there'll be a place out in space where they'll say, well, time for a galaxy. And so the steps to initiating the angular momentum in energy that leads to a vortex that then leads to star formation, and matter is manifesting. Now I'm hit the kind of the limit of my understanding, so we're gonna have some study aids here. First, I'll show you the. How are we doing on timing? I think we got about 5 minutes.
You're fine. Yeah, carry on.
No, sharing is not turned on, so I'm going to request that you make me co-host so I can show you.
Multiple presenters? No, I think press.
I'm sorry?
Byron is requesting you to allow multiple presenters to share. You have a team there who's going to share. Would you be able to share on your own? Share screen?
I think he can be made co-host, and then he'll be
Yeah,
able to share
yeah,
easily.
that's how you do it. Yeah.
Byron. Yeah, I think it's better that
And
way
that's going to
because
be
we had,
your job, Crystal,
there you
as
go.
host.
You are now co-host. Because in
Okay.
the past we had a problem when we have multiple sharing. We had trolls coming in to interrupt presentations by speakers, so you're fine now.
Okay. So this is a very quick look at the entire cosmos, according to the Urantia book, but it's flattened and a lot of distortion here. You can see on the left side the central universe, but that's of course outside of space and time, and it has paradise as its center, and so surrounding it are the inhabited galaxies. So the first ring, which rotates counterclockwise, is inhabited. This is signified by single galaxies, but it's disputed interpretation for each book. I think it's galaxy clusters, but there's a kind of a big interpretation battle. But be as it may, this is seven great sectors that are inhabited by these trillions of planets that are now inhabited. Then these outer rings are, the galaxies that perhaps are now being viewed by the Webb telescope, and these are uninhabited. They're uninhabited galaxies and will be inhabited in the future. And then, real quick, on the right side is depictions of higher interdimensional worlds that have celestial beings, angels and super angels with all kinds of functions. Um, some of which are revealed, some of which are not, but they are ministering to the humanoid worlds in various ways, including seraphim, which we hear about in the Bible.
Yes.
And much more to say, but we've got just a couple minutes left. And I want to read to you in closing so you get a feel for the literary quality of the Urantia book. This is paper 42. And 42 is something I would recommend you look at in particular because this is where free energy, so to speak, is revealed. It's revealed cosmology, and most students of the Ranch book don't read it. It's very advanced, and you have to have science training to understand it, really, and philosophic training. But I'll read a little bit, give you a feeling of it. This is paper 42, section 1. The foundation of the universe is material, but the essence of life is spirit. The father of spirits is also the ancestor of universes. The eternal father of the original son, that is the second person of the Trinity, is also the eternity source of the original pattern, the Isle of Paradise. So remember the center of the material center, paradise. Matter, I'm sorry, matter, energy, for they are but diverse manifestations of the same cosmic reality, as universe phenomena are inherent in the universal deities. Matter may appear to manifest inherent energy and to exhibit self-contained powers, but the lines of gravity involved in the energies concerned in all these physical phenomena are derived from and dependent on paradise. The ultimaton, ULT, ultimaton, the first measurable form of energy, think of something like a quark, has paradise as its nucleus. So the smallest unit of matter they call the ultimaton has the center of the cosmos as its nucleus. There's innate in matter and present in universal space a form of energy not known on your world. This is 1930s. When this discovery is finally made, then will physicists feel that they have solved, well, his theological stuff, I'll skip that. The creation of energy and the bestowal of life are the prerogatives of the universal Father and his associate creative personalities. That's the Son and the Spirit. The river of energy and life is a continuous outpouring from the deities, the universal and united stream of paradise force going forth to all space. This divine energy pervades all creation. I'm going to skip from there to just a quick item on space potency. Space potency is the unquestioned free space presence of the absolute. I'm going to skip a bit. The phenomena in Genesis, I'll skip that. Space potency is a pre-reality. Space potency is a pre-reality. It is the domain of the absolute and is responsive only to deity grasp, so to speak. But it is modifiable by the presence of the force organizers. That's the types of being that can modulate space potency into pure energy. And the term space potency has a name, and the name for it is absoluta. Absoluta.
How do you
This is
spell that?
as the word absolute, ABSOL, absoluta.
Absoluta. Okay.
Absoluta. So this is the infinite, reservoir of energy in all of space. And once it's the so-called force organizers, these particular kind of computer beings, enter into a domain, they then begin they move it into what's called segregata. So from absoluta, begin to segregate so that you have pure energy, and then there's other being that's called primordial force, and then it moves through the agency of other beings into emergent energy, and finally into gravity energy. So there's a whole series of of explanations of these things. So when energy becomes responsive to gravity, then obviously you have what we see manifest. And so this is why Urantia Book people are like your friends, because we have this revealed cosmology that states that there is this 0 point energy resident in all space. It's inherent, but its source is from creator and a creator outside of space-time. So I'll leave it there and look forward to your comments and questions.
Wow, that's profound. Thank you so much for explaining that and reading this very important what you call selected phrases from your text, the Urantia text, which is so important for us free energy technologies and researchers to seriously think about where they can tap from the ethers, the free energy components that are already there in space. So I have a couple of questions before I pass the microphone over to co-host first to continue with the Q&A. This is truly essential readings, folks, the Urantia books. So reach out for it. You can Google it and get it from Amazon, right, Byron?
All of it's online for free. You can just
online.
type in paper
Online for
42
free.
Urantia, and you'll see this paper I was just reading from. Yeah,
Wonderful.
You download ebooks free, etc.
Right. There you go. So explore. This is what this platform is about anyway. It's a learning platform. So you're talking about free energy being space potency, free energy.
and it is there in paradise, the particle location of the universe, you're saying, the center of all things, which is outside of space-time. The singularity, you're saying, center is in the universe. But we are talking about here on this planet Earth, which apparently is a very important center as well for all beings to experience and discover through our experiences here as we are seated here, right? According to what you were saying from the Urantia books, Byron, that the creative beings are the ones who are the architects of the human species who put together the seedlings here, right, Byron?
Yeah.
So
Right.
would you like to elaborate a little bit about how it all got started here on this planet, maybe millions of years ago?
It says 550 million years ago was when the life implantation occurred. That doesn't exactly map to what we're saying today in evolutionary biology, but that's their statement. So this is when the the factors were ready for life implantation, and there had to be, I won't go into detail, but at the right time, the life carriers of this local area of planets, right? So there are local systems of planets or local universes of planets. Our local system has its life carriers and they have their labs on high, right? So it says that they had 500,000 different formulations for planet Earth. By the way, the name of planet Earth, according to them, is Urantia. That's where you get that funny word. Urantia is the name of the planet. So they then formulated a single cell entities to literally physically put into the three different locations where there was well nigh perfect conditions, warmth and light and water and moisture. So in those single cells are the entire design that leads to the evolution of hominids. All those speciation steps that lead to hominids is present, and as the we start out as pond scum, so to speak, and then we evolve from there, and the life carriers remain for, I think it's at 500,000 years observing, and they are empowered to intervene. For example, it said that there was a line of genetic line leading through frogs that was the favored line of genetic advance, and that almost got snuffed out. That almost got snuffed out. So they actually did a kind of an intervention to make sure this frog did not get eaten. And if you snuff out a certain line, you might move in a different direction. So that's why we have, for example, reptilian ETs or insectoid. You can have lines of evolution. And that's why it's a little bit easier for a Urantia book person to think of insectoid ETs. But it's better to have, apparently that there's a fairly rare, right? So, but they grow, they become able to have civilizations and have interstellar travel. So yeah, so that's just a summary for you. Hope that
Yeah.
helps.
So, Byron, I'm full of curiosity, and I have a couple of questions leading up to your talk from where you started. Okay, so you're talking about the creative beings, the cosmic beings, who are residing in the center of the universe when you started off your lecture. So they are from the seventh heaven, right? The source of space-time. So is there where source is, the source of all that is?
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's really that for a human mind, there's a beginning, but in fact, there's no beginning. It's eternal. But the beginning is the father principle of the source principle of source, right? So that's self-existing, always infinite. It's infinite. But it has structure. There's structure to deity, right? So the three gives you permutations that can give you all sorts of features of both life and energy.
So you're saying source is truly the Trinity, that is the Father, the Mother, and the unity of the two.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So
Exactly.
source, where it is residing in, is the center of the universe. You're saying, as per the diagram that you were showing, where
Right.
the galaxies are at the peripheral circulating the center, and that is the residence of source.
Right. So the center it's paradoxical because it's not.
Could you show that diagram again on the screen share, please? So we know where to locate visually
So this is in a linear map, very distorted
where
map,
source
showing
is.
the
Yeah.
center here. So out here, I didn't get into it, it's called Havona. Havona. These are 1 billion worlds that have personal beings on them that are eternal beings. They're actual citizens of these worlds. So in their universe, everything's perfect. Everybody's perfect. There's no experiential development or evolution. So that's what that is. Yeah. And there's the kind of black holes that surround this that I can't explain it. Maybe a Urantia scientist could explain. So this is why we don't see it, but it's literally outside of space-time anyway. But that's what this band is. And then these galaxies. There's rotation in opposite direction. See, this rotation arrows is clockwise. This band of galaxies counterclockwise and clockwise, right? This is really a big picture image.
Fascinating. All the more we want to reach out for the Urantia books. We all have been seeded here and how we are made here and how we are part of a fragment of source. So in the making of the alchemy of the human species that you said, a lot of the DNA of the various combination are being put together to have us made as the fragment of God, the co-creator that we are walking on this planet. Is that right?
Right. So, first of all, many of you probably know that Francis Crick said something like this, that there's panspermia, he called it, that there must be some way of formulating DNA from outer space and it gets transferred to the planet. So it's kind of the same idea. But that's just the biological factor, right? So the life factor is imparted in a kind of miraculous way through these life carrier beings. They are conduits for the life spark. They are not the source of it. The life spark comes from divine mother presence. Divine mother presence is imparted to these single cells. If now I'm forgetting your question, but just think of that as what then is life itself has this inherent quality of evolution and urge to reproduce, procreate as well, and other urges that are inherent at 7 levels. There's 7 entities actually that are imparted by the Divine Mother to evolution. We didn't get into that. That manage life up to the point of the evolution of hominids, more or less. So once that happens, and hominids have kind of standing up on 2 legs, then there's another impartation I didn't get into, which is the impartation of indwelling spirit of deity. So this is like the Buddhist notion of the Buddha nature, or the Hindu notion of the Atman. It gets implanted in every human being. So they have the dwelling deity within them. This great teaching, the perennial teaching of same in Quakerism and others, there's this life spark of divinity inside each person, but that comes much, much later. But it is part of evolution.
Right. So you're saying that we provide the experience of ascension for all beings, beings from not just this universe, but the universes all over that had been created by creator source creator, right? So how do they then get to connect with us, to learn from us the experience of let me see, ascension for all beings? You're talking about the peripheral universes, right? And
Right.
we are being created as the perfecting ascender, as
Right.
humans, the human species. So
Right.
the other peripheral universes beings will learn from us the existential and the evolutionary processes of our experiences.
Right.
How does that come about? There's no
How does it come
interaction.
about?
How do they learn?
I didn't fill in very much about the so-called ascension. So let me just drop that in here. So in the afterlife, after one's death, one is now in ascension. And we don't want to get into the theological issues about survival. We'll leave that aside, but almost everybody survives into the afterlife. That is also evolutionary. So the afterlife itself is a domain of evolution in the evolving space-time universes, although it's interdimensional space-time. So you're domiciled on spheres. Everything in the Urantia cosmology, there aren't angels sort of floating around with harps, right, in space. Everything is domiciled on spheres. It may be an interdimensional sphere, but it's actually spherical planets. So these higher planets are places of education and edification and enlightenment that go on for many levels, many worlds, ascending all the way back to the central universe, right? So this is a very big thing to encompass in your mind and heart, right? That you have this eternal life where you're going back to source, so to speak. But to get back to source, you have to be perfected. You can't even fit in there. You won't go in there because you won't have perception. You won't see anything when you get there because you have to have gone through these many, many, many levels. So that people run around in India saying they're enlightened. That is nothing compared to the enlightenment of the afterlife. It's nothing, zero, nothing compared to the levels of enlightenment we will have in the afterlife, which qualify us to return to the center. Once you're in the center, there's a training there to send you out to the uninhabited galaxies. I didn't get into that either, but these uninhabited galaxies will be populated by beings like us who've gone through billions of years of evolution to perfection. You're perfected beings, and then you're sort of appointed to run galaxies out in space, out in deep space. So this goes on for a very long time. And I guess there's one other piece I should add, which is that the evolution of all beings on all planets, on all worlds, all this evolution, all this experience is in memory. It's in memory. It's in the Akashic record, so to
Akashic
speak.
records in the halls of Amenti.
But there are two minimal basic levels of memory. One is local memory in your soul. That's memory. That's memory of your life. But then there's composite accumulated memory of all beings and all souls. The oversoul, that's the evolving deity. I didn't get into that, but deity itself evolves in space-time. And that idea was contributed also by Teilhard de Chardin and Whitehead and Aurobindo, this idea of deity evolves. So the evolving deity is the deity of evolution coming into its final omega state, you might say. And so life in the evolving universes comes to a final fruition where all those galaxies become completed in their perfection.
So we are basically experiments of the biochemists of this creator beings from source, basically. And therefore, Urantia, which is the name of a planet, it's so
Our
important. And
yeah.
is it unique to Urantia alone? Because there are billions of planets in the universe or the universes. Is it just this planet of
No.
ours,
Yeah, all
Urantia?
planets. Yeah, all planets have about the same set of protocols, for their evolution. Yeah, there's life carriers, for all planets that do this, and they're not created. Don't think of them as creators. The creators are higher beings who are creator deities. I didn't add that Christ is a creator of the local universe. We get into that, but that Jesus Christ is at the center of the Urantia Book, a different section of the Urantia Book, as an incarnate being who's the local creator. A local creator is the local source of 10 million inhabited planets. So a local universe, our local universe has many millions of inhabited planets, and its deity, local deity, is actually Christ and a female consort to him. How's that for something enigmatic?
Yes. So we go through cycles, right? So we have the 25,650 years of the ascension descension cycle, which is coming to an end very soon for our planet Urantia. So does it mean that we are finally going to come together, the past, future, present, all in one time space where we will be remembering, I mean, the wheel of forgetfulness will then just drop, and we will be united again with the biochemists and everyone from source creation?
That's a great question. So, this is the eschatology question, right? The science of the end. So that's what you're asking. And it's a pretty intricate thing, but think of all of those planets evolving together slowly, very, very slowly, millions, billions of years, really, until they're all complete in their evolution. And the memory of all of that is encoded, embedded in this, what's known as the supreme, the evolutionary deity that is evolving as the accumulated memory of all past existence in space-time. So when the last person in the universe hits Buddhahood, so to speak, the very last person, don't let that be you. When the last person in the universe hits the level of perfection, then it flashes into existence that it's one great soul, and we have access to all memories of all beings, and we have kind of a foreknowledge of that, you might say, in remote viewing
Mm.
and other forms of psychic, that you can see, see these things in the past, for example, that are in the Akashic record.
So thank you so much for answering my questions so succinctly. I think I will pass the microphone over to Dr. Russell, my co-chair, to ask you questions about space having potency, an ocean of reservoir of energy where we can tap from to create what we are here to develop for humanity's evolutionary process use. Over to you, Fres.
Thank you very much. Okay, basically, because of the beginning introduction of how you're presenting your material and
Yeah.
not wanting to jump, too far advanced in this question, we have this energy that's basically around us all the time. It basically keeps everything running. Whether we do anything to it or not, it's built into the system. From the center, you talked about life being planted. And another way of saying this is a terraformation or terraforming, and the planet Earth may have been terraformed. And the next word that comes in is the transpermia, which is possibly some sharing of genetic materials from one area of the universe to another. And so we start to see some similarities inside this sphere because of this expansion out. And it has to be at the right time in the right place type of thing to make it happen. And this begins the evolution process. The species on planet Earth, Homo sapiens sapien, has basically jump-started that, or began its roads outward into our solar system, and expanding slightly out of it with some of our spacecrafts that have left our solar system to go into this inner space between galaxies.
Right.
The nuts and bolts question on this, inadvertently, because of our space crafts and our we don't really get very sterile with our process because we're living in a very dirty environment in the first place. Stuff gets taken with us to another planet. And we've already landed, quote, on Mars, on the moon, maybe Venus, and maybe other moons. And are we not, in fact, starting this process, if we got there at the right time, as the beginning of another evolution cycle in a different planet? Or are we interfering with another evolution process by introducing our genomes and our creatures from our planet onto this one, so we can end up with a destructive force doing? Is this kind of what you're talking about, as we're evolving outwards, as we are taking the creative force that's within us and co-creating out into our galaxy or our solar system first?
That's a big question that I'm going to try. I'm going to try. I mean, we're not qualified, from what I can tell, to exit the solar system. We have channels in the Urantia movement who channel new updates. Their work is disputed, but one of those that I follow states recently that there's a consciousness issue here. You are unable to live if your ship leaves the environment of the field, this morphogenic field of the planet, of your planet. If you're too far out of that field, you cannot survive. So we cannot go out. So we're not going to be able to do destruction out there. No. But we cannot create life. Obviously, we're not qualified to implant life. We're just not. So that's not the danger. The danger is weapons. We're bringing or mining, and exploitative mining or something on these worlds that is associated with the secret space program or whatever, that, dark forces are, have slaves, that sort of thing. This is all illegal because the universe, one thing you learn from the Urantia book is there's governance in the universes. It is not a big anarchy out there. And celestial, or, extraterrestrials are here under the aegis of the universe government. And if they're in violation of that, they are rogue. So they're probably rogue races that are here that should not be here, that would have to be turned away under the proper conditions. So we can send out destruction from here, but they can bring it from outside, right? So if there are dark entities, ETs, coming, which many of us believe, that is in violation of universal law.
Mm-hmm. That comes to
Great.
the
I'm
question
going to do
of,
one real follow-up on this, and then we've got some questions in the chat. One of the points that is interesting about what you just said was that the spacecraft that we sent out 40 years ago into deep space, as we think of it, just turned itself around after making contact with something that shouldn't have been there. And it's like it encountered a planet that isn't attached to a solar system or galaxy. It's just there. And the navigation things kicked in and altered. And that craft is coming back at us right now as we speak, according to the news. Interesting. So
Yeah.
it's like, nope, you can't leave. Goodbye.
I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, we sent out a radio beacon, which was a binary before we launched that spacecraft. It also has the gold disc on it that gives basically who we are, where we're located, and a way of communicating to us. Well, apparently something that it ran into, and they're thinking it's a planetoid of some sort, said, okay, and it sent it back our equipment to talk to us. It was like, okay, this is how we do it then. And it basically is returned to sender like a carrier pigeon, the pigeon back to us. So we'll see how it happens.
That is so great to know. Thank you.
Yeah, great stuff to know. Okay, we have some questions in the chat, and let's see if I can bring that up, and then one of the questions, more recent one, is how do my connection to source look like? How do I have 1 foot in source, and how does that work?
Spiritual question, and that's quite appropriate. So the influences that we have from source are threefold. So from the first source and center, the father, mother really, is the fractal, the indwelling spark of deity. That's one. That's different from the Son, the second person of the Trinity, who's stemming from the second person of the Trinity in paradise is Christ, the Christ being, and that being is the source of the Holy Spirit. So the Holy Spirit influence is a very different influence on our spiritual evolution from there. So really, those are the two that I'll go into that are the factors in spiritual evolution, among others. And the gift of the Holy Spirit is post-Christ, the Pentecostal gift, the gift of Pentecost. And coming with that is the universal dissemination of this Atman, fractal, to all beings. I misspoke before. That only comes after an incarnation of the kind that we had with Christ as Jesus. So this is gifting of the planet because the planet's evolution had been very, very distorted, and I didn't touch on this, by the angelic rebellion. That's really outside the scope of this discussion, but of which I wrote an entire book. One of my last books is there was as the Bible says, there was an angelic Luciferic rebellion on this, but also other planets, local planets. And those planets are retarded in their evolution and they're warlike planets. So you need to have special arrangements for a planet like ours, which had these defaults, because the local angels of the planet, the actual angels in charge of the planet, went to the dark side. So there's a huge mitigation effort right now. And the current issue of, between sort of cabal dark forces and the forces of light is, this war in heaven, so to speak. So the Urantia Book feeds into that with a much, much, much more advanced cosmology than you get in the Bible.
Mm-hmm. Right, time's running out.
I want to continue a little bit about the question. I meant also how I'm as a person, me, Henrik, how am I connected to source? Do I have more parts that are more, and that's what I meant with 1 foot in heaven, so to say. Do I have a straight connection to source, or how does it work?
You have an evolutionary connection to source, right? So evolution is not really straight, but you do.
In this moment, I have to communicate through the one of the Holy Trinity, or like so, at the moment.
If you have a kind of Buddha mind, you might say you have a direct connection with the divine. Really, I mean, saints have this direct, because it's inherent, because it's embedded in you, in your heart mind, is the infinite, really spark of the Creator. So in theory, yes, you have direct, and that's really the teachings of the gospel of Jesus is it's within you. The kingdom is within you. So yes, a mystic has this direct, but it's still in evolution. You can't necessarily, hoist yourself all the way to paradise and skip all the steps in between.
Oh, okay.
Except that Enoch probably did something like that, maybe. Elijah too.
Thank you,
Okay,
Byron.
thank you.
There's a question on chat. Do you think the current passage through the photon belt has any measurable impact on the quantum field or zero-point energy? By Hedge.
I haven't heard
Anita.
photon belt for, I guess Sheldon Neidl was the one to source that. I don't, in the 80s, but I don't know anything about the photon belt other than, the prophecy that this is the end time. And so we're past the energy, so the kind of the current view of that I'm hearing is the sun, the sun energies are advancing our evolution and making exponentially faster. That's a mystical, notion that I'm beginning to hear. But I don't know if that's a photon belt. And that would imply, I just add a footnote to that fits the Urantia cosmology, because in theory, a being can modulate the energy of the sun for certain purposes. So that could be done to speed up evolution, consciousness evolution.
Everybody's like impatient to have the phenomenon of being able to tap onto the absoluta, the free energy, the source of all is that from the energy of all space, the infinite reservoir. So I suppose we can reach there. We're supposed to have reached there a while back already in 2012, right? When we had the supposed awakening, ascension, but it didn't happen because we've been delayed and we've been experimented upon over and over by the controllers, I presume. So that's why we have our ET brothers and sisters assisting us in so many levels, like diffusing the nuclear bombs and stuff like that, and helping us remember who we are with the many teachings and channelings, and yourself doing a very great service in reminding us as well. But by and by, I suppose, people have to be aware that they have to live their lives impeccably and checking themselves every step of the way in this process of evolution, of ascension, that they are 100% in alignment with Creator's loving light before they can have the true self-aware awakening process where they can tap onto the segregator or the primordial force that you were talking about, right? Which is connected with the absoluta, the infinite reservoir of energy of all space, before we can have absolute free energy for all things needed in our lives in humanity, right?
That, the reverse engineered, UFO propulsion systems has already been accomplished in the 1950s. Probably some of you guys know, some of you know that. So this technology is held by, certain forces already. But as to tapping absoluta for your personal evolution, not exactly that.
Not exactly.
Tapping
it's a long time yet, yeah.
Spirit energies, right? Whole different thing. Energies of spirit are distinct from absoluta, although absoluta is prior to the differentiation of energy and spirit. Absoluta is not energy, it's pre-energy. So in theory, absoluta is spirit and energy, but humans cannot tap that. You need special beings that modulate that into pure energy. And pure energy still has to be modified into matter.
So it's a step at a time. It's not really linked up and connected together, right? Absoluta is for pure ascension to become awakened beings that is formless, right? So you're talking about the free energy that we are attempting to do in devices in Meta that the secret space program has been using for like since the 40s or 30s, right? And that is not privy to us, the normal humans. It's only to the controllers, the elitists, unfortunately. So has the Urantia books come across any, have you come across any of the revelations in the Urantia books that we will finally be free eventually of all this control, the grip of control that is not allowing us to evolve in a much faster rate?
Right. So there is a sense of evolution in the Urantia book which is purposive and which is inexorable. So it can't be stopped, but it really can be slowed down. But it can't be stopped.
Okay.
So it's a
Good.
matter of timing, and the timing is not good because the technology is much more advanced than the moral evolution and the consciousness evolution. That's the great crisis that we all know, right? So that the technology, that's why there is a sense in which free energy devices, all of those involved have to be very, very careful about
Absolutely.
how it falls into the hands of the wrong, the wrong people. Because we don't have the rule of law on the planet, and that's how they're able to rob you guys of your patents, of your inventions. But on the other hand, if they, there's also an argument that there has to be a defense. As long as you have, enemies that are armed against one another, they can use this as a weapon. They'll weaponize it. They already have. They already have done it. And these things exist as weapons, I have no doubt, but I don't have proof.
Thank you, Byron.
Well,
Russ, is there anything
don't want to end on
else?
that note.
Russ?
I think it's a good place to end. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody.
Back to you, Kristen.
I started a journal of Urantia Book studies. It's an academic journal. If down the road one of you wants to submit a paper, you can find me. I think we posted my websites for that, and we're looking for articles by scientists who studied the Urantia.
Right. As I said time and again in our recordings, that everyone out there, viewers, you have a chance to contact the speakers directly. You don't have to go through me, as we have put the speakers' links in our website and our publications in social media. Okay, thank you. So, Byron, is there anything that you want to say to the viewers as a closing statement?
I don't think that the free energy devices will succeed if it's driven by the wrong motive. And so it's a matter of heart that one must be heartful with these very powerful technologies, and one must really give it away. But it must be under protection. And I hope that we can find political protection for what you guys do. It's certainly spiritual protection for what you're doing.
Thank you so much. That's so wonderful to know. So, folks, as I always said, this is a divine mission. If we were to do this from our hearts, as what this group is doing, Byron, you can see, we are not taking funding from any direction, nor are we sponsored or whatever. It's from our pockets. And we've been doing this for 8-9 years. And it's truly from the heart. And we are open sourcing it, of course, once we got the right proof of concept or, proof of production. So I would like to say it will be so wonderful if any of you out there, Byron, since you are always a speaker on a celebrity in the Contact in the Desert conferences where it's so popular, if you were to have this contacts and connections to the ETs of the SSP councils, and if they want to release free energy technologies, think about us. We can do it, and we have the hearts.
Right,
Yeah, to do it. Yeah, we truly have. You know, this is our passion, and we will do it because we want to incubate the scientists. We have plans to incubate the scientists, developers, and inventors of free energy as well as healing technologies in our incubators at FESIG. We've been running for 9 years now, and we've got some of the world's most brilliant speakers here, inventors, scientists, technologies, developers of the technology. So we are all here waiting. If we were to be beneficiaries of the release of these advanced technologies, we will be so, so happy to carry through the divine mission in a more impactful way. Thank you.
Please carry on. It's
Thank
prayers
you,
for
Byron.
all of what you're doing. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bless your heart in what you're doing as well, awakening people up worldwide. Press, is there anything else?
Only that there are Urantia experts on these matters of free energy that if you ever want to interview, I can arrange for that. That, you know, there are astronomers and astrophysicists and physicists that work, you know, there's actually one group that's working on a free energy device, trying to get an investment.
Oh, certainly. We would be so honored if we could do that.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'll send this
mean-
interview to them, and you'll connect with some folks in the States that are much more plugged into the science.
wonderful. So if you don't mind, I'll take a couple of weeks to have it published on YouTube. All right. I will send it to you right away as soon as it's published, Baron. That's a
Okay.
promise. Right.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank
All right.
you. Thank you,
Well done.
Fres. So shall I just wrap it up, Coach?
Yes. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So there being no other business now, this first session of Physics 136 meeting is now adjourned to the second session. So we are taking a toilet break about 5 minutes and everybody just jump back, okay? And thank you so much, Byron, for a very enlightening
everybody.
talk today.
My
Namaste,
pleasure.
brother.
Bye
Thank
now.
you. All right, we can stop recording now.